The sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Redemption Creek, Colorado, as Virgil Quinn rode in on his aging stallion, a haunted look in his eyes and $3 in his pocket, all that remained of his life savings. It was 1879, and the West was as unforgiving as ever, especially to a man who'd lost everything but the clothes on his back, his faithful horse, and the bitter knowledge that he would never father children of his own. Virgil dismounted with a wince, his tall frame bending slightly under the weight of his 35 years. The last decade had worn on him the war, the cattle drives, the failed attempts at homesteading, and finally, the devastating news from the doctor in Denver. "Your bout with the mountain fever left scars you can't see, Quinn," the physician had told him. "You'll never have children of your own. Best make peace with it." He tied his horse to the hitching post outside the general store and dusted off his worn denim pants. His once white shirt had turned a permanent shade of trail dust, and his boots were cracked from too many miles. The only thing that still looked decent was his hat, a good Stetson that had seen him through the worst of times. "Looking for work?" asked an old-timer sitting on a bench outside the store, whittling away at a piece of wood. "Looking for a future," Virgil replied, his voice gruff from disuse. He'd barely spoken to another soul in weeks. The old man chuckled. "Ain't we all? You might try the Silver Strike Ranch. Heard they're short-handed after losing some men to the Silver Rush up north." Virgil nodded his thanks and pushed through the door of the general store. A small bell jangled, announcing his arrival. Behind the counter stood a portly man with a thick mustache and suspenders straining against his bulk. "Help you, stranger?" the shopkeeper asked. "Just passing through," Virgil said, his eyes scanning the shelves out of habit. He wasn't here to buy, couldn't afford to, but old habits died hard. That's when he heard it, the sound of children's voices coming from the back room. Normally, he would have ignored it, would have turned away from the painful reminder of what he could never have. But something in the tone, desperation mixed with hope, made him pause. "What's going on back there?" he asked the shopkeeper. The man sighed heavily. "Orphans. 3 of 'em parents died of cholera 2 towns over. Nobody wants 'em, and the orphanage in Denver is full up. Been trying to find them homes for 2 weeks now." Virgil should have walked away. Should have thanked the man and asked directions to the Silver Strike Ranch. Instead, he found himself saying, "Can I see them?" The shopkeeper looked surprised but shrugged. "Suit yourself. They're in the storeroom. Sister Mary from the church brings them food, but they can't stay here much longer." "I need the space." Virgil walked to the back of the store, each boot step echoing on the wooden floor. He pushed open a door to find 3 children huddled together on a makeshift bed of flour sacks. The oldest, a boy of about 8, stood protectively in front of 2 younger children, a girl who looked to be around 6 and a small boy who couldn't have been more than 4. "Who are you?" the oldest boy demanded, his chin jutting out defiantly despite the fear in his eyes. "Name's Virgil Quinn," he said, keeping his distance. Children were like wild animals, you didn't crowd them. The children stared at him with wary eyes. They were thin but not starving, their clothes worn but clean. Someone had been looking after them, at least minimally. "You gonna take us to an orphanage?" the girl asked, her voice small but steady. Virgil shook his head. "No, he stopped, not sure why he was even there. What was he going to do with 3 orphaned children? He had no home, no money, and no future to offer them, and then it happened. The youngest boy, who had been hiding behind his siblings, peeked out and stared at Virgil with eyes that seemed too knowing for such a small child. "Virgil," the little boy said clearly. As if he'd been waiting his whole short life to say that name, Virgil felt a chill run down his spine. "How does he know my name?" he asked the other children. The oldest boy looked confused. "He don't talk much. That's the first word he's said in days." "Virgil," the small boy repeated, taking a tentative step forward. Something broke open inside Virgil's chest. Something he thought had died along with his dreams of family and home. He knelt down to the child's level. "What's your name, little one?" "This here is Sammy," the oldest boy said. "I'm Jack and that's Emma. How much?" Virgil found himself asking as he walked back to the front of the store, the shopkeeper following. For what? The children. How much to take them? The shopkeeper's eyebrows shot up. You want to take all three? You don't look like you could afford one meal for them, let alone three. Virgil pulled out the $3, everything he had left in the world. This is all I've got, but I'm a hard worker, I can provide for them. The man looked at the money, then back at Virgil, measuring him with his eyes. $3 for 3 orphans seems fitting in a sad way, he sighed. Look, mister, I can't in good conscience sell children, but I can let you take responsibility for them. Sister Mary will want to know where they're going. I'm heading to the Silver Strike Ranch to look for work, Virgil said. If they'll have me. The shopkeeper nodded slowly. Silver Strike is a good outfit. Owner's a fair man. Tell you what, you take the kids and I'll throw in some supplies. Can't have them going hungry their first night with you. Virgil was overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. An hour ago, he was a lonely drifter with no future. Now he was responsible for 3 young lives. Why did the boy know my name? He asked, still shaken. The shopkeeper shrugged. Kids pick up things, maybe he overheard someone say it. But Virgil hadn't mentioned his name to anyone but the children. He shook off the strange feeling and focused on the practical. Thank you for the supplies. Is there a place we can stay tonight before heading to the ranch tomorrow? There's a widow at the edge of town, Hannah Evans. She sometimes takes in boarders. Decent woman, lost her husband in a mining accident 2 years back. Virgil nodded his thanks and went back to collect the children. They had gathered their few belongings, a small wooden horse for Sammy, a frayed ribbon for Emma, and a pocket knife for Jack. Their entire lives packed into a single small flour sack. We're leaving, he told them. I'm taking you with me. Jack looked skeptical. Why, nobody wants 3 kids. I do, Virgil said, surprising himself with the truth of it. I'm going to find work at a ranch and you'll have a place to sleep and food to eat. It won't be fancy, but it'll be home. Emma's face brightened. A real home. With beds, eventually, Virgil promised, though he had no idea how he would keep that promise. For tonight, we're going to stay with a lady in town, and tomorrow we'll head to the ranch. Sammy walked up to him and slipped his small hand into Virgil's calloused one. Virgil, he said again, with a smile that seemed to know too much. They collected the supplies. The shopkeeper provided beans, flour, bacon, and a few other essentials, and Virgil led them and his horse down the main street toward the widow's house. People stared at the strange procession, but Virgil kept his eyes forward. He'd made his decision for better or worse. Hannah Evans's house sat on a small plot of land at the edge of town, a modest 2-story structure with a well-tended garden and chickens pecking in the yard. Virgil approached the front door, the children trailing behind him like ducklings. He knocked, and moments later, the door opened to reveal a woman in her early 30s with honey-colored hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her dress was simple but well-made, and her green eyes widened at the sight of Virgil and the 3 children. Mrs. Evans? Virgil asked, removing his hat. The storekeeper said you might have room for boarders tonight. Hannah Evans looked from Virgil to the children and back again. I wasn't expecting a family, she said, her voice gentle but cautious. We're not, Virgil began, then stopped. They were orphaned. I've taken responsibility for them. We just need a place for the night before heading to Silver Strike Ranch tomorrow. Hannah's expression softened as she looked at the children. You poor dears, she said. Then to Virgil, Silver Strike is hiring. I hope so, he said honestly. It's my last chance. Something in his voice must have resonated with her, because she stepped back and opened the door wider. Come in then. I have 2 spare rooms. The children can share one and you can take the other. Supper's almost ready, just a simple stew, but there's plenty. Thank you, madam, Virgil said, relief washing over him. I can pay, she waved him off. We'll discuss that after you've eaten. You all look half-starved. The inside of Hannah's home was modest but comfortable, with simple furniture, clean floors, and curtains that let in the evening light. The smell of beef stew filled the air, making Virgil's stomach growl audibly. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had a home-cooked meal. "You can wash up at the pump out back," Hannah told them, pointing toward the rear of the house. "Towels are on the porch." Virgil led the children outside, helping each of them wash their hands and faces. Sammy giggled as the cold water splashed his cheeks, a sound so pure it made Virgil's chest ache. Emma tried to smooth down her tangled hair, and Jack watched everything with the wary eyes of a child who had learned not to trust good fortune. When they returned inside, Hannah had set the table with mismatched plates and cups that somehow looked perfect together. She ladled thick stew into bowls and placed a loaf of fresh bread in the center of the table. "Sit," she invited them, and the children scrambled onto chairs, their eyes wide at the feast before them. Virgil waited until Hannah sat before taking his own seat. "This is very kind of you, Mrs. Evans." "Hannah, please," she said. "And it's nothing. I've more than I need for just myself." They ate in relative silence, the children too hungry to talk and Virgil too overwhelmed by the day's events to make conversation. Hannah occasionally asked gentle questions: how old they were, where they had come from, but didn't press when the answers were brief. After supper, when the children were settled in their room and Virgil was helping Hannah wash the dishes, she finally asked the question he'd been dreading. "What made you take in 3 orphans when you clearly have nothing to offer them?" Virgil's hands stilled in the wash basin. "I've been asking myself the same thing," he admitted. "I was passing through town down to my last $3 when I heard them in the back of the store. I should have kept walking." He paused, remembering the moment that changed everything. "The youngest one, Sammy, he said my name. I'd never met him before, never even seen him, but he knew me." Hannah's brow furrowed. "That's strange." "More than strange," Virgil agreed. "It felt right somehow. Like I was meant to find them, which sounds foolish coming from a man my age." Hannah studied his face, her green eyes searching. "Not foolish, perhaps providential." She dried her hands on a towel. "My Thomas always wanted children, but we weren't blessed that way. After he died, I thought that dream died with him." Virgil recognized the pain in her voice. It mirrored his own. "I can't have children," he said quietly. "The mountain fever took that from me years ago." Hannah's expression softened with understanding. "Yet here you are with 3. "Here I am," he agreed, "with no idea what I'm doing." She smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed her face. "Does anyone? We all just do our best and pray it's enough." Virgil helped her finish the dishes, and as he was about to retire to his room, she stopped him. "Mr. Quinn, Virgil, please." Virgil then. "The Silver Strike Ranch is 5 miles north of town. It's good work, but hard. The owner, Mr. Blackstone, is fair but demanding. If you'd like, I can write you a letter of introduction. I sell eggs and vegetables to the ranch cook." Virgil was touched by her offer. "I'd appreciate that, Hannah, and please call me Virgil," she nodded. "I'll have it ready for you in the morning." "Good night, Virgil." "Good night, Hannah." Virgil checked on the children before going to his own room. They were fast asleep, curled together like puppies on the bed. Sammy's small hand was stretched out, as if reaching for something or someone. Virgil gently tucked it under the blanket and closed the door quietly behind him. In his own room, he sat on the edge of the bed and put his head in his hands. What had he done? He had no money, no prospects, and now 3 children depending on him. He was a fool. But then he remembered Sammy saying his name, and something settled in his heart. Whatever happened tomorrow, he would find a way to make this work. He had to. Morning came too soon, with rosy fingers of dawn stretching across the sky. Virgil had been awake for hours, his mind racing with plans and worries in equal measure. He slipped outside to tend to his horse and found Hannah already in the garden, gathering eggs from her henhouse. "Good morning," she called, straightening up with her basket of eggs. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough," Virgil lied. "Can I help with anything?" Hannah smiled. "You can bring in some firewood if you don't mind. I'll start breakfast." By the time the children woke, Hannah had prepared a hearty meal of scrambled eggs, bacon, and biscuits with honey. She packed them a lunch for their journey: cold chicken, more biscuits, and apples from her tree. "This is too much," Virgil protested as she handed him the packed lunch and the promised letter of introduction. Nonsense, Hannah said firmly. Children need to eat, and so do you. She hesitated, then added, if things don't work out at Silver Strike, you're welcome to come back. I could use help around the place and the children would be safe here. Virgil was touched by her offer. Thank you, Hannah, for everything. The children, well fed and rested, were more animated than they had been the day before. Emma chattered about Hannah's beautiful house. Jack asked questions about the ranch, and Sammy, still quiet, kept close to Virgil's side. They set off mid-morning, Virgil walking alongside his horse, which now carried their supplies and occasionally one of the children when they grew tired. The road to Silver Strike Ranch wound through rolling hills dotted with scrub oak and pine, following a creek that eventually widened into a small river. Will we have our own beds at the ranch? Emma asked as they walked. I hope so, Virgil said. But we might have to share for a while until I can build something better. Pa used to let me help him build things, Jack said, his voice small but proud. I can help you. I'd like that, Virgil replied, touched by the boy's offer. What kinds of things did you build with your pa? As Jack launched into a description of the chicken coop and fence they'd built, Virgil noticed Sammy watching him intently. The small boy hadn't said anything since yesterday, but his eyes seemed to take in everything. They stopped for lunch by the creek, sitting in the shade of a large cottonwood tree. The children devoured Hannah's packed lunch, and afterward, Emma and Jack splashed in the shallow water while Sammy remained close to Virgil. Virgil, the boy said suddenly, looking up at him with serious eyes. Yes, Sammy, the boy pointed toward the north. Home. Virgil felt that strange sensation again, like the boy knew something he didn't. That's right, he said carefully. We're going to try to make a home at the ranch up ahead. Sammy nodded solemnly, as if Virgil had passed some test, then wandered over to join his siblings by the water. They reached Silver Strike Ranch by mid-afternoon. It was larger than Virgil had expected, several buildings clustered around a main house, with corrals, a barn, and bunkhouses spread across the property. Fields of hay stretched to the east, and to the west, cattle grazed on the rolling hills. Beyond, the mountains rose in purple majesty, still capped with snow even in late spring. Virgil gathered the children close as they approached the main house. Let me do the talking, he told them, and remember your manners. They nodded, suddenly shy in the face of the imposing ranch. Virgil knocked on the door of the main house, hat in hand, his heart pounding with the knowledge that everything depended on the next few minutes. A tall man with a silver-streaked beard opened the door. He wore a vest over a white shirt, and a pocket watch chain glinted in the sunlight. Can I help you? He asked, his eyes taking in Virgil's worn appearance and the three children behind him. Mr. Blackstone, Virgil asked. My name is Virgil Quinn. I'm looking for work, and I was told you might be hiring. He handed over Hannah's letter. Mrs. Evans in town suggested I come see you. The man took the letter and read it quickly. Hannah Evans is a fine woman, he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. Says here you're experienced with cattle and horses. Yes, sir. I worked cattle drives from Texas to Kansas for 5 years, and I've broken horses since I was a boy. Mr. Blackstone looked past him to the children. And these would be my responsibility, sir, Virgil said. They were orphaned, and I've taken them in. The ranch owner's eyebrows rose. Noble, but not practical for a ranch hand. Virgil straightened his shoulders. I can work harder than any 2 men, Mr. Blackstone. The children won't be a burden. The boys are old enough to help with chores, and the girl can learn. We don't need much, just a roof and fair wages. Mr. Blackstone studied him for a long moment, then sighed. I need someone to manage the north pasture and the horses there. It's isolated, a small cabin about 3 miles from the main ranch. Previous hand quit to go chase silver in the mountains. It's yours if you want it, but I can only pay standard wages, regardless of how many mouths you've got to feed. Relief washed over Virgil. Thank you, sir. We'll make it work. Don't thank me yet. It's hard work and a harder life. He glanced at the children again. My wife might have some things for the little one's clothes, books. She always wanted a house full of children. I'll have someone show you to the cabin. You can start work tomorrow at dawn." As Blackstone turned to call for one of the ranch hands, Sammy stepped forward and stared up at the ranch owner. "Home," he said clearly, nodding as if confirming something to himself. Mr. Blackstone looked startled, then uncomfortable. "Peculiar child," he muttered, before raising his voice to call for someone named Charlie. A young ranch hand appeared, and Blackstone instructed him to show Virgil and the children to the north pasture cabin. As they followed Charlie to where they would hitch Virgil's horse to a wagon for the journey, Virgil couldn't shake the feeling that Sammy's behavior had unsettled the ranch owner. "The boy doesn't speak much," Virgil explained to Charlie as they loaded their meager belongings into the wagon. "We're not sure why." Charlie, a freckled young man in his early 20s, shrugged. "Some folks don't need many words. My sister didn't talk till she was 5, and now we can't get her to hush up." He smiled at the children, his friendly demeanor putting them at ease. "You'll like the north cabin. It's small, but it's got a good view of the mountains, and there's a creek nearby with the best fishing in the county." The journey to the cabin took nearly an hour, the wagon bouncing along a rutted track that wound through stands of aspen and pine before opening onto a grassy plateau. The cabin came into view, a simple structure built of logs with a stone chimney and a small covered porch. A corral stood nearby, currently empty, and a shed that had seen better days leaned against the side of a hill. "Home?" Emma asked tentatively as they climbed down from the wagon. "Home," Virgil confirmed, hoping it was true. The inside of the cabin was basic but sound: a main room with a stone fireplace, a rough table and chairs, and a separate bedroom with a large bed. A loft above could serve as a sleeping area for the children. There was a hand pump at a simple sink, a luxury Virgil hadn't expected, and shelves for storage. Everything was dusty from disuse but otherwise clean. "Previous hand left about a month ago," Charlie explained. "Cook will send up some supplies tomorrow with one of the boys. Your job is to keep an eye on the horses in the north pasture, about 30 of them, and break the new ones that come in. There's good grazing up here in summer, but you'll need to move them closer to the main ranch come winter." After Charlie left, promising to return the wagon the next day, Virgil and the children stood in the center of the cabin, taking in their new home. "It's dirty," Emma observed. "Then we'll clean it," Virgil said with more confidence than he felt. "Jack, see if you can find a broom. Emma, help me shake out these bedding. Sammy, you can help by picking up anything that doesn't belong in here." To his surprise, the children set to work without complaint. By sunset, they had the cabin reasonably clean, a fire going in the fireplace, and their few belongings stowed away. Hannah's packed lunch had been their dinner, supplemented by coffee Virgil found in the cabin's stores. It wasn't much, but they were together, and they had a roof over their heads. As darkness fell, Virgil settled the children in the loft, using his bedroll and a worn quilt he found in a trunk to make them comfortable. Jack and Emma fell asleep quickly, exhausted by the day's journey and work, but Sammy remained awake, his eyes shining in the dim light from the fire below. "Virgil," he whispered. "Yes, Sammy? Home now?" Virgil nodded, still unsettled by the boy's certainty. "Yes, this is our home now. Try to sleep." Sammy nodded and closed his eyes, but not before reaching out to touch Virgil's hand. The simple gesture of trust nearly undid him. Downstairs, Virgil sat at the rough table making plans by the light of a single candle. They needed supplies: food, proper bedding, clothes for the children. His first wages wouldn't come for 2 weeks. He'd have to be resourceful until then. A soft knock at the door startled him. Who would be visiting at this hour, so far from the main ranch? He opened the door cautiously to find Hannah Evans standing there, a lantern in one hand and a large basket in the other. "Hannah," he asked, bewildered. "What are you doing here?" She smiled, looking slightly embarrassed. "I thought you might need a few things to get started. May I come in?" Virgil stepped back, still shocked by her appearance. "Of course, but how did you get here? It's a long way from town." "I have a wagon and a perfectly good horse," she said, setting the basket on the table. "And I know the way to Silver Strike well enough. I sell produce to them regularly." She looked around the cabin. "You've done well with the place already." "The children helped," Virgil said. "They're asleep upstairs." Hannah began unpacking her basket: bread, cheese, dried meat, apples, a small sack of coffee, sugar, and other essentials. There were also 3 small handmade rag dolls, a wooden top, and a set of carved animals. "The toys were my husband's handiwork," she explained. "He made them for the children we hope to have. I thought your 3 might enjoy them." Virgil was overwhelmed by her generosity. "Why are you doing this?" Hannah smoothed the cloth she'd brought the items in, avoiding his eyes. "I've been alone since Thomas died. Helping others gives me purpose." She glanced up at him then, something vulnerable in her expression. "And I like the children. They deserve a chance at happiness." "As do you," Virgil said softly, surprised by his boldness. A faint blush colored her cheeks. "I should go. It's a long ride back to town." "Stay," Virgil found himself saying. "It's too dark to travel safely. You can have the bedroom and I'll sleep by the fire." Hannah hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and practicality. "I wouldn't want to impose. You've brought us food and comfort when we needed it most. Offering you shelter for the night is the least I can do." Finally, she nodded. "Thank you. I'll leave at first light." That night, as Virgil lay by the dying embers of the fire, he reflected on the strange turns his life had taken in just 2 days. From a solitary drifter to the guardian of 3 children, from homeless to employed, from alone to... What? He thought of Hannah sleeping in the next room, of her kindness and the gentle way she had with the children. It was too soon to name the warmth he felt when he looked at her. But it was there, undeniable as the stars outside. In the loft above, Sammy stirred in his sleep, a small smile on his face as if he knew secrets the adults had yet to discover. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Hannah had breakfast cooking before Virgil even woke, oatmeal sweetened with a precious spoonful of honey and thick slices of the bread she'd brought. The children came down from the loft, shy at first to find her there, but quickly warming to her presence. "Did you come to stay with us?" Emma asked hopefully, helping Hannah set the rough-hewn table. "No, dear, I'm just visiting," Hannah replied, though Virgil noticed a wistfulness in her eyes. "I need to get back to my chickens and garden." "Will you come back?" Jack wanted to know, setting out the wooden spoons Hannah had brought. She glanced at Virgil, a question in her eyes. "If I'm invited?" "Anytime," Virgil said without hesitation. "You'll always be welcome here." After breakfast, Hannah prepared to leave, loading her empty basket into her small wagon. The children each gave her a hug, even shy Sammy, who whispered something in her ear that made her eyes widen briefly before she smiled and patted his head. Virgil walked her to the wagon. "What did Sammy say to you?" Hannah looked troubled for a moment. "He said, 'You'll be back, Mama.'" Children say strange things sometimes. Virgil felt that same chill he'd experienced when Sammy first said his name. "He's an unusual child. They all are," Hannah said softly. "You're doing a good thing, Virgil Quinn." "I hope so," he replied honestly. "Thank you again for everything." She climbed into the wagon and gathered the reins. "I'll come back in a week or so with more supplies. The children will need proper clothes and bedding." "I can't ask you to. You didn't ask," she interrupted with a smile. "I offered. Neighbors help each other out here. That's how we survive." As Hannah's wagon disappeared down the trail, Virgil turned to face his first day as a ranch hand and guardian to 3 orphaned children. The task seemed overwhelming, but somehow, knowing Hannah was out there, caring about what happened to them, made it seem possible. The days fell into a rhythm. Virgil rose before dawn to check on the horses, returning to the cabin to help the children dress and eat before heading out again. Jack, eager to prove himself useful, followed Virgil everywhere, learning about horses and ranch work with a solemn dedication that belied his young age. Emma took charge of the cabin, sweeping and tidying with a seriousness that made Virgil's heart ache for the childhood she should have had. And Sammy, still quiet, spent his days exploring the meadow around the cabin, bringing back interesting rocks and flowers, occasionally saying something that stopped Virgil in his tracks with its uncanny insight. A week after they arrived at the cabin, Charlie rode up with their first supplies from the main ranch: flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, and other staples. He also brought news. "Mrs. Blackstone wants to meet the children," he told Virgil as they unloaded the supplies. "She's been after the boss to invite you all down for Sunday dinner." Virgil felt a flutter of anxiety. The Blackstones were their employers, and in many ways their fate rested in the ranch owner's hands. "When?" "This coming Sunday," Charlie said. "Don't worry, Mrs. B is the kindest woman in the territory. She loves children." Sunday came quickly. Virgil had the children wash as thoroughly as possible in the creek, put on their cleanest clothes, and tried to tame their wild hair with water and a comb. They looked poor but presentable, and Virgil felt a surge of pride as they climbed into the wagon Charlie had sent for them. The main house of Silver Strike Ranch was impressive up close, a two-story structure built of local stone and timber, with wide porches and tall windows. As they approached, a woman emerged from the front door, tall, dignified, with silver-streaked dark hair and a warm smile that immediately put Virgil at ease. "You must be Mr. Quinn," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Victoria Blackstone, and these must be the children I've heard so much about." Virgil shook her hand. "Thank you for inviting us, Mrs. Blackstone. Please call me Victoria, and who do we have here?" she asked, bending slightly to address the children. Jack stepped forward first, remembering his manners. "I'm Jack, madam. This is my sister Emma and our little brother Sammy." Victoria's eyes softened. "What lovely children. Please come in. Dinner is almost ready." The inside of the house was as impressive as the outside: polished wood floors, comfortable furniture, and shelves lined with books. The children's eyes widened at the luxury surrounding them. Mr. Blackstone appeared from what Virgil assumed was his study, nodding a greeting. "Quinn, children, welcome." Dinner was served in a formal dining room by a Hispanic woman who Victoria introduced as Maria, their cook and housekeeper. The meal was simple by city standards but lavish compared to what Virgil and the children had been eating: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. The children managed their manners admirably, though Emma nearly gasped aloud at the sight of the pie. Conversation flowed easily, with Victoria asking gentle questions about the children's interests and how they were settling into the cabin. Mr. Blackstone, Matthew, as his wife called him, was more reserved but not unkind, asking Virgil about the horses in the north pasture and nodding with approval at his report. After dinner, Victoria took the children to a small room off the main parlor, returning with an armful of books. "These were meant for our children," she said, a shadow crossing her face. "We were never blessed that way. I'd like your three to have them." Virgil was touched by the gesture. "That's very generous, Mrs. Victoria." "Nonsense," she said briskly, though her eyes were kind. "Books gathering dust are a sin. These should be read and loved." She hesitated, then added, "I'd be happy to teach the children their letters if they don't already know them. They could come down to the main house once a week." Virgil looked to Mr. Blackstone, uncertain if he was overstepping. The ranch owner nodded slightly. "My wife is an excellent teacher. She taught at a school back east before we married." "Thank you," Virgil said. "That would be a blessing." As they prepared to leave, loaded down with books and a basket of leftover food from Maria, Victoria pulled Virgil aside. "Mr. Quinn, I hope you don't mind my asking, but is there anyone caring for the children while you work? A woman's touch is important, especially for the little girl." Virgil felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't thought of that. "They manage during the day. I check on them when I can." Victoria frowned slightly. "Perhaps we could arrange something. Maria has a niece who might be willing to help." "Actually," Virgil said, thinking of Hannah, "there's a widow in town, Mrs. Evans, who has been very kind to us. She visits when she can." Victoria's expression brightened. "Hannah Evans." "Yes, I know her. Lovely woman and such a tragedy about her husband. That might be the perfect solution. She patted his arm. Don't worry, Mr. Quinn, we'll make sure those children have what they need. On the wagon ride back to the cabin, Emma clutched one of the new books to her chest while Jack examined a small pocket knife Mr. Blackstone had given him. Sammy, unusually, had fallen asleep against Virgil's side. Mr. Blackstone said I could learn to work with the horses when I'm bigger, Jack said, pride evident in his voice. He said I have a good seat for riding. Mrs. Blackstone said I could learn to sew proper dresses, Emma added. She's going to show me how. Virgil smiled at their excitement. For the first time since taking responsibility for them, he felt he might actually be able to give them a decent life. When they reached the cabin, a familiar wagon was waiting. Hannah had returned as promised, with more supplies and, to the children's delight, a cat to keep the mice at bay. The Blackstones invited us to dinner, Emma told her as they unloaded Hannah's wagon. They gave us books and said Virgil is doing a good job with the horses. Hannah smiled. That's wonderful. The Blackstones are good people. Later, after the children were asleep, Hannah and Virgil sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Colorado sky. Virgil told her about Victoria Blackstone's concerns regarding the children's care during the day. She suggested hiring someone, he said. But I thought perhaps. Hannah turned to look at him, her face illuminated by the lantern hanging beside the door. Perhaps what, Virgil? Perhaps you might consider spending more time here, he said carefully. The children adore you and I. He trailed off, uncertain how to express the growing feelings he had for this kind, steady woman. Hannah was quiet for a long moment. My house in town is lonely, she finally said. But I've built a life there, my garden, my chickens, my independence. I understand, Virgil said quickly. It was presumptuous of me to suggest. No, she interrupted, placing her hand tentatively on his arm. It wasn't presumptuous, it's just not a simple decision. She took a deep breath. Let me think about it. Perhaps I could come stay for a few days each week to start. Hope blossomed in Virgil's chest. That would be wonderful. They sat in companionable silence, the night air cool around them, the sound of crickets and the distant nickering of horses creating a peaceful symphony. Virgil, Hannah said suddenly, how did you come to take in the children? You never really explained, Virgil sighed, staring out at the darkness. I had just arrived in town, down to my last $3. I heard them in the back of the general store and went to look. He paused, still troubled by the memory. Sammy said my name. He'd never met me before, never even seen me, but he knew me. Hannah turned to face him. What do you think it means? I don't know, Virgil admitted, but it felt, faded somehow, like I was meant to find them or they were meant to find me. He laughed softly. That sounds foolish. Not foolish, Hannah said, echoing her words from their first evening together. Providential, perhaps. Their eyes met in the lantern light, an understanding passing between them. Whatever had brought them all together, Virgil, Hannah, and the 3 orphan children, it felt right, as if pieces of a puzzle were slowly finding their places. The next morning, Hannah returned to town with a promise to come back in 3 days, bringing enough of her belongings to stay for a week. As Virgil watched her wagon disappear down the trail, Sammy tugged at his hand. Virgil, the boy said. Yes, Sammy, she'll come back, forever. Virgil looked down at the serious little face. What makes you say that? Sammy shrugged, a gesture so ordinary it almost masked the extraordinary certainty in his words. Just know. True to her word, Hannah returned 3 days later with a trunk full of her belongings and plans to stay the week. The children were ecstatic, especially Emma, who had desperately missed having a woman's guidance. Hannah brought fabric to make proper curtains for the windows, seeds to start a kitchen garden, and most precious of all, her time and attention. With Hannah's help, the cabin transformed from a basic shelter to a home. She hung the curtains, arranged wildflowers in jars on the table, and organized the shelves with an efficiency born of years keeping her own home. She taught Emma to sew and cook, let Jack help her with the garden, and spent hours with Sammy, drawing out the quiet boy with stories and gentle questions. Virgil, watching this transformation, felt something shift in his heart. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for years began to recede, replaced by a warmth he hadn't felt since before the war. At night, after the children were asleep, he and Hannah would sit on the porch, talking about their days, sharing memories, and planning for the future, a future that, increasingly, they both seemed to imagine together. On the fourth day of Hannah's stay, as they worked side by side building a proper chicken coop, Hannah had brought 6 hens with her, much to Emma's delight. Virgil found himself studying her profile, the determined set of her jaw as she hammered a nail, the loose strand of honey-colored hair that had escaped her practical bun, the slight smile that curved her lips when she caught him looking. "You're staring, Mr. Quinn," she teased, setting down the hammer. "I was just thinking how different everything is with you here," he said honestly. "Better, like pieces falling into place." Hannah brushed a smudge of dirt from her cheek, her expression growing serious. "I've been thinking about Victoria Blackstone's suggestion about someone caring for the children while you work." Virgil's heart quickened. And I think I could sell my house in town," she said carefully. "I could bring my chickens here, plant my garden here, if that's what you want." Virgil set down his saw, turning to face her fully. "Hannah, that's exactly what I want, what we all want. The children adore you, and He paused, gathering his courage. "I've grown to care for you deeply." Hannah's eyes shone with unshed tears. "It's fast, isn't it? We barely know each other." "Sometimes life gives you a second chance when you least expect it," Virgil said. "I never thought I'd have a family, never thought I'd feel this way again after losing everything, but here we are." Hannah stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used. "Here we are," she agreed softly. Virgil reached out, hesitantly at first, then with more confidence when she didn't pull away and touched her cheek. "I know it's proper to court a lady for months before speaking of such things, but life out here doesn't always follow proper rules. Will you stay, Hannah? Not just for the children, but for me too." Instead of answering with words, Hannah rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips gently to his, a brief, sweet kiss that held the promise of 1,000 more to come. "Is that a yes?" Virgil asked when she pulled away, his voice rougher than before. Hannah smiled, her cheeks flushed pink. "It's a yes, Virgil Quinn, I'll stay." From the corner of the cabin where he'd been quietly playing with a carved wooden horse, Sammy watched them with a knowing smile on his small face. "Told you," he whispered to himself. "Forever." The weeks that followed were full of work and planning. Hannah returned to town to arrange the sale of her house and property, bringing back more of her belongings with each trip. Victoria Blackstone, delighted by the turn of events, sent down linens, dishes, and other household items as a gift. Matthew Blackstone, not to be outdone, arranged for 2 of his men to help Virgil add a proper bedroom to the cabin for the children, giving him and Hannah privacy once they were married. The wedding took place on a Sunday in late summer, a simple ceremony performed by the traveling preacher who visited the ranch every month. Victoria hosted the celebration at the main house, insisting that Hannah deserved a proper wedding feast. The children were scrubbed clean and dressed in new clothes, gifts from the Blackstones. Emma served as Hannah's attendant, proudly holding a bouquet of wildflowers, while Jack stood tall beside Virgil, taking his role as best man very seriously. Sammy, in a new shirt that made him look older than his 4 years, held the simple gold band Virgil had saved his first month's wages to buy. As Hannah walked toward him in a blue dress she'd made herself, her hair down around her shoulders and woven with meadow flowers, Virgil felt a happiness he'd never thought possible. When they spoke their vows, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their days, he knew with certainty that he'd found his home at last. The celebration afterward was joyful but modest, good food, music from a ranch hand who played the fiddle, and the company of the Blackstones, the ranch hands, and a few of Hannah's friends from town. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the ranch yard, Virgil found a moment of quiet with his new wife. "Happy?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning into him. "And you?" Virgil looked across the yard to where the children played with the other ranch children, Jack showing off his new skills with a lasso, Emma carefully carrying a plate of cake to an elderly neighbor, and Sammy, watching everything with those knowing eyes of his. "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted. "After the doctor told me I couldn't father children, I thought that was it. No family, no legacy, nothing but loneliness stretching out ahead of me." Hannah squeezed his hand. "Yet here you are, a husband and father of 3. "Father," Virgil repeated, testing the word. "I never dared think of myself that way." "It's what you are," Hannah said, "in all the ways that matter." That night, after they returned to their cabin, now truly a home, and the children were tucked into their beds in the new bedroom, Virgil and Hannah lay together in the quiet darkness, marveling at the strange path that had led them to each other. "I keep thinking about that day in the general store," Virgil whispered. "How Sammy knew my name, how everything changed in an instant." Hannah traced his face in the darkness. "I've been meaning to ask the children about their parents, about what happened before you found them. But I wasn't sure if it would upset them." "I've wondered too," Virgil admitted. "Jack talks about their pa sometimes building things, fishing, but never their mother, and they don't speak about how their parents died." Hannah was quiet for a moment. "Tomorrow," she decided. "We'll ask them tomorrow. Gently. They should be able to remember their parents, to honor their memory." Virgil agreed, pulling his new wife closer, grateful for her wisdom and the gentle way she approached everything, especially the children. The next morning, after breakfast, as they all sat around the table, Hannah broached the subject carefully. "Children, Virgil and I were talking. We realized we don't know much about your parents, what they were like, the good times you had with them. Would you like to tell us about them?" Jack and Emma exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Jack spoke first. "Pa was tall, like Virgil. He could lift me up with one arm. He taught me to fish and ride." Emma nodded. "He made the best flapjacks, and he'd sing to us at night." "And your mother?" Hannah prompted gently when they fell silent. A strange look passed between the older children. Emma's eyes filled with tears and Jack's face closed off. "We don't remember her much," Jack said, his voice tight. "She left when Sammy was just a baby." Hannah and Virgil exchanged surprised glances. "Left?" Virgil asked. Jack nodded, his expression guarded. "Pa said she needed to go away for a while, but she never came back." Emma wiped her eyes. "Pa said she was an angel watching over us, but then he got sick and—" She trailed off, unable to continue. "And he went to be with her," Jack finished, his voice barely above a whisper. Virgil felt a surge of anger toward the unknown woman who had abandoned these children, followed by deep gratitude that he and Hannah could now give them the stable home they deserved. Throughout this exchange, Sammy had been unusually focused on a drawing he was making with a pencil stub and a piece of paper Victoria had given him. Now he pushed it across the table toward Virgil. The drawing, simple as it was, showed a man who looked remarkably like Virgil, a woman with long hair who resembled Hannah, and 3 small figures, clearly the children. Above them was a crude depiction of the cabin, with the mountains in the background. "Family," Sammy said, tapping the paper. Virgil looked at the drawing, then at Hannah, whose eyes had filled with tears. "Yes, Sammy," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We're a family now." Jack and Emma crowded around to see the drawing, their earlier sadness forgotten in the simple joy of Sammy's creation. Hannah gathered the small boy into her lap, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "It's beautiful, Sammy," she told him. "The most beautiful picture I've ever seen." Later, after the children had gone outside to feed the chickens, Hannah turned to Virgil, her expression troubled. "Their mother abandoned them," she said. "No wonder they've been so eager for a woman's care." Virgil nodded, equally disturbed by the revelation. "And their father dying like that, leaving them alone in the world. It's a wonder they're as well adjusted as they are." Hannah's hand found his across the table. We can't change their past, but we can give them a future, a good one. We will, Virgil promised. Together. As autumn turned the aspens golden and the nights grew colder, life at the north cabin settled into a comfortable routine. Hannah made the cabin cozy and welcoming, tending her garden and chickens, teaching Emma domestic skills, and keeping Jack and Sammy occupied with lessons and useful tasks. Virgil worked with the horses, earning the respect of Matthew Blackstone with his skill and dedication. On Sundays, they would all go down to the main house for dinner, a tradition Victoria had insisted upon. The Blackstones, childless themselves, had become almost like grandparents to Jack, Emma, and Sammy. Victoria continued her weekly lessons with the children, teaching them to read and write, delighted by their quick minds and eager attitudes. As winter approached, Virgil moved the horses closer to the main ranch, as instructed, but the Blackstones surprised him by offering to let his family continue living in the north cabin. "It's your home now," Matthew said gruffly when Virgil expressed concern about the arrangement. "We'll set up a workshop near the main barn for you to work through winter, but there's no need to uproot your family." Virgil was grateful beyond words. The cabin had indeed become home, and the thought of moving, even temporarily, had been troubling Hannah and the children. Snow came early that year, blanketing the mountains and meadows in pristine white. Virgil rode to and from the main ranch each day, working with the horses in the large barn, returning home each evening to the warm glow of lamplight in the cabin windows and the delicious smells of Hannah's cooking. One such evening, as December winds howled outside, the family gathered around the fireplace after supper. Hannah was knitting, Jack was whittling a small figure under Virgil's guidance, Emma was practicing her letters, and Sammy was curled up with the cat, watching the flames dance. "Tell us a story, Pa," Emma said, looking up from her slate. Virgil's heart swelled at the title. She'd been calling him that for weeks now, as had Jack. Only Sammy still called him Virgil, though with such affection that Virgil didn't mind. "What kind of story would you like?" he asked. "One about when you were a boy," Jack suggested. "Before the war." Virgil thought for a moment, then began a tale about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, helping his father with the crops and his mother with her beekeeping. As he spoke, he noticed Sammy watching him intently, those knowing eyes fixed on his face. When the story was finished and the children were preparing for bed, Sammy approached him, tugging at his sleeve. "Virgil," the boy said, his voice quiet but clear. "I knew you'd find us." Virgil knelt down to the child's level. "What do you mean, Sammy?" Sammy's gaze was steady, older somehow than his years. "Pa said to wait for the man named Virgil. He said you'd come for us." A chill ran down Virgil's spine. "Your pa knew my name. How is that possible?" Sammy shrugged, the gesture at odds with the certainty in his eyes. "Don't know. He just said you'd come, and you did." Before Virgil could question him further, the boy yawned hugely, and Hannah appeared to take him to bed. Virgil remained kneeling on the floor, troubled and confused by Sammy's words. Later, he related the conversation to Hannah as they prepared for bed themselves. "It's strange," he admitted. "How would their father have known my name? I've never been to the town where they lived before." Hannah considered this as she brushed her hair. Children sometimes misremember things. Perhaps their father said to wait for help, and Sammy connected that with your arrival. "Perhaps," Virgil agreed, though he wasn't convinced, "but it doesn't explain how he knew my name that day in the store." Hannah set down her brush and came to sit beside him on the edge of the bed. "Does it matter? Whatever brought you all together, I'm grateful for it. If you hadn't found the children, you might never have come here. We might never have met." Virgil pulled her close, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair. "You're right. The how doesn't matter as much as the why, and the why is clear enough. We were all meant to be a family." Christmas approached, bringing with it a flurry of preparations. Hannah and Emma made gifts in secret. Jack disappeared into Virgil's workshop whenever he had a free moment, and even Sammy seemed to be plotting something, whispering with Victoria during their weekly lessons. On Christmas Eve, The Blackstones hosted a celebration for the entire ranch hands, families and neighbors from miles around. The main house was decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, and an enormous tree stood in the corner of the parlor, adorned with candles and handmade ornaments. The children received gifts beyond their wildest dreams: new clothes, books, toys, and from the Blackstones, a beautiful sleigh drawn by a gentle pony for all three to share. "It's too much," Hannah protested when Matthew led the sleigh out of the barn, to the children's shrieks of delight. Victoria waved away her concerns. "Let us spoil them a little. Matthew and I have no children of our own to indulge." Virgil's gift to Hannah was a silver locket containing miniature portraits of the children, painted by an artist who had visited the ranch in November. Her gift to him was a handsome leather journal, the first pages filled with her neat handwriting documenting their family's story from the day they met. "For the children," she explained, "so they'll always know how we became a family." Later that night, after returning to the cabin with tired but happy children, presents, and enough leftovers from the feast to feed them for days, Virgil and Hannah tucked the little ones into bed. As they were leaving the children's room, Sammy called out, "Virgil, Hannah, wait." They turned back and Sammy slipped out of bed, retrieving something from under his pillow. It was another drawing, more detailed than his previous efforts. This one showed their cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, the mountains behind, and 5 figures standing in front. 5. Hannah questioned, counting again. "Who's this?" She pointed to the smallest figure held in her drawn counterpart's arms. Sammy smiled his enigmatic smile. "Baby brother, coming soon." Hannah's hand flew to her stomach, her eyes wide as she looked at Virgil. They had been trying for a child of their own, hoping despite the doctor's dire prediction about Virgil's fertility. "Sammy," Virgil said carefully, "how do you know this?" The boy shrugged, climbing back into bed. "Just know," he said, as he had so many times before. "Like I knew you'd come for us." That night, as snow fell gently outside their window, Virgil held Hannah close, her head resting on his chest. "Do you think it's possible?" she whispered. "A baby of our own." Virgil stroked her hair, thinking of all the impossible things that had already happened since that day in the general store. "I think Sammy knows things the rest of us don't," he said finally, "and I've learned not to doubt him." Hannah snuggled closer. "A baby would make our family complete." "Our family is already complete," Virgil corrected gently. "A baby would be a blessed addition to what we already have." As winter gave way to spring, Hannah's waistline began to expand, confirming what Sammy had somehow known months before. The doctor from town, summoned by a concerned Virgil, confirmed that despite his previous diagnosis, Virgil was indeed going to be a father again. "It's a miracle," Hannah whispered as they stood on the porch that evening, watching the children play in the yard now free of snow. "One of many," Virgil agreed, his hand resting gently on her growing belly. He looked at Jack teaching Emma to throw a lasso, at Sammy sitting quietly making a crown of the first spring flowers. "I still wonder sometimes how Sammy knew my name that day. How he seems to know things before they happen." Hannah followed his gaze to their youngest. "Some questions don't have easy answers," she said. "But I believe everything happens for a reason. You were meant to find those $3 in your old coat pocket. You were meant to walk into that store at that exact moment. You were meant to hear those children and go looking for them. And Sammy was meant to say my name," Virgil finished, setting in motion everything that followed. As if sensing their attention, Sammy looked up, his smile bright in the spring sunlight. He waved, then returned to his flowers, seemingly content in the knowledge that all was as it should be. In late summer, as the aspens began to show hints of gold at their edges, Hannah gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Thomas, after her first husband. The children were enchanted with their new brother, especially Sammy, who would sit for hours just watching the infant sleep. "You knew," Virgil said to him one day as they sat together on the porch, Hannah inside nursing the baby. "You knew about Thomas before he was even conceived." Sammy nodded, unsurprised by the question. I know lots of things, he said simply. Like what? Virgil asked, curious despite himself. Sammy thought for a moment, then smiled. Like Jack's going to be a horse trainer like you when he grows up, and Emma's going to marry the doctor's son but not for a long time, and you and Hannah are going to be happy for always. Virgil felt a lump form in his throat. What about you, Sammy? What does your future hold? Sammy shrugged, that curious adult gesture that seemed both wrong and right on his small frame. Don't know yet, but it's good. We're all good. As they sat there, the afternoon sun warming them, Virgil found himself believing the boy completely. They were all going to be good. The path that had led them here might have been strange and winding, but it had brought them exactly where they needed to be. Later that evening, as Hannah sat in the rocking chair Virgil had made for her, nursing baby Thomas while the other children sat around the hearth, Virgil took out Hannah's journal. He'd continued the story she'd started, documenting their wedding, the seasons that followed, and now the birth of their son. I want to add something, he said, picking up a pencil. About how it all began, Hannah nodded, understanding without him having to explain. Virgil wrote carefully, choosing his words with precision. It began with $3 and 3 orphans, with a small boy who somehow knew my name before we'd ever met, with a town I was just passing through and a woman whose kindness changed everything. Looking back, I can see how each piece, however unlikely, however seemingly random, was necessary to create the whole of our happiness. I don't pretend to understand how Sammy knew to call my name that day in the store, or how he seems to know things before they happen. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only accepted with gratitude. What matters is this. A family was formed from broken pieces, love grew where there was only loneliness, and a future neither Hannah nor I dared imagine became our beautiful reality. He closed the journal and looked around at his family, Hannah with baby Thomas, Jack and Emma playing a game of checkers by the fire, Sammy drawing yet another of his mysterious pictures. Outside, the mountains stood sentinel against the darkening sky, steadfast and unchanging as they had been for millennia. Happy? Hannah asked, echoing their exchange on their wedding day. Virgil met her eyes across the room, feeling the perfect rightness of this moment, this life they had built together. More than I ever thought possible, he replied. And you? Hannah smiled, looking down at their son and then at the 3 children who had changed everything. Complete, she said simply. Absolutely complete. In that moment, Virgil understood that some journeys aren't about where you end up, but who you find along the way. His journey had begun with $3 in his pocket and a heart heavy with loss. It had led him to 3 orphaned children, a widow with a heart as big as the Colorado sky, and a happiness deeper and more profound than anything he could have imagined. And it had all started with a small boy saying his name. Virgil, Sammy said now, looking up from his drawing with that knowing smile. Story time, Virgil nodded, gathering his family close around the hearth. Once upon a time, he began, there was a lonely cowboy with $3 to his name.